Hello and welcome. You're watching India Ascends. This is a show that gets you stories about India's rise, its ascent. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi, and as always, we start the show with the headlines that we're tracking this edition. A week in Trumpland is almost a lifetime. The US president continues his flip-flop with India, from turning Prime Minister Modi as his friend to revoking sanctions waiver on Chabahar. US continues to add uncertainty to the bilateral relationship. After Nepal, yet another red flag surfaces in India's neighborhood. This time it's Maldives, where massive protests have taken place due to the government's controversial media ban. Opposition terms it draconian. Saudi Arabia and Pakistan ink a mutual defense pact triggered by Israel's attack on Qatar. With deepening India-Saudi military partnership, this pact will impact New Delhi's security calculus. In a fresh crackdown on women, Taliban orders removal of books written by women from Afghanistan's university curriculum, part of a new decree banning the teaching of human rights and sexual harassment. Authorities said 680 books have been revoked. And the frenzy over iPhone 17 in India continues, with large crowds gathering overnight to get their hands on the latest from the Apple stable. This is the Made in India iPhone. Well, viewers, the big story this week on India Ascends is once again the neighborhood. Now, just a week after Nepal faced intense turmoil, after Gen Z protesters shook the country, took to streets and toppled the government, there's fresh trouble that's brewing in India's neighborhood. This time it's the Maldives, where after the Maldivian government passed a contentious media bill which gives it unchecked power, journalists have said, and they're appealing to the country's Supreme Court to repeal these laws, which they say are going to stifle media voice completely, even as steep fines are actually proposed in the bill. The Modi government is not taking this lightly. They are detaining anyone who's opposing them, probably learning their lessons from Nepal. But the democracy in Maldives is under siege right now. How much will this impact the entire region? How much will this destabilize Indo-Pacific? Remember, Maldives is a very strategically located country in the entire Indo-Pacific. Could this impact the Modi government's future as well? This report has all the answers for you, and then we come back and decode its larger implications for India and the entire region.
A democracy under siege and the press in the process. The Maldives government has passed a controversial new media regulation bill, a sweeping law that allows for hefty fines and the temporary or permanent closure of media outlets. Critics have declared it the war on free speech. The bill bulldozed through Parliament on Tuesday, where President Muizu's ruling People's National Congress holds a supermajority. This media control bill gives the state unchecked power, giving a new commission loyal to President Muizu the authority to suspend and shut down media houses without a court order. While the bill seeks to curb defamation and misinformation, it fails to clearly define fake news, with journalists facing fines up to $1,620 and media companies up to $6,485 for violating the law. As the bill passed, chaos erupted inside and outside Parliament. 7 opposition MPs were forcibly removed, protesters detained, and journalists manhandled. Riot police cracked down on spontaneous protests, arresting at least a dozen. While the government defends the law as a tool to protect Islamic values and national interest, activists and media watchdogs are calling it state censorship disguised as regulation. Maldives, now a high-end tourist destination, has had a checkered democratic past. Many now fear the island nation is at risk of rolling back democratic gains made since 2008, when the country transitioned from 3 decades of autocracy under Maumoon Abdul Gayoom to a multi-party democracy. For New Delhi, which recently reset ties with Mali, this crackdown could complicate a critical relationship. Maldives remains a strategic player in the Indian Ocean, but any volatility and instability in the nation may spill over on the entire Indo-Pacific, a risk New Delhi cannot afford to take.
Now, viewers, there's a lot of volatility right now in India's entire neighborhood. There have been regular eruptions that have been happening, unfortunately, with alarming frequency. Bangladesh erupted last year due to student protests, which quickly descended into complete chaos and anarchy. A similar template played out in Nepal. And now, in fact, it's happening in Maldives. Earlier, it took place in Sri Lanka as well. The question that we are asking is, who stands to gain with this volatility? Who benefits from the entire region being in uncertain times? And who makes deeper inroads when civilizational and cultural ties with India get tested during such revolts? The answer to these questions will determine and shape India's relations with our entire neighborhood going forward. The first wide-angle story on the show. So Saudi Arabia has announced a defense pact with Pakistan. It's a mutual defense pact that triggers a response if either of the two countries are attacked. The pact, in fact, reflects what really is happening in terms of the uncertainties around the world. But I would say that Saudis have been able to successfully weaponize the near total bankruptcy of Pakistan by coming out with this pact. And let's get you some of those details as far as this pact is concerned and the implications and significance of it for the entire world. First up, in terms of what is in it for Saudi Arabia, there's nuclear insurance. Pakistan is the only Muslim majority nuclear country in the world. So there is nuclear deterrence that Saudi Arabia are able to get from it, as well as military manpower. Saudis essentially do not have much military capabilities. They rely heavily on America, and Pakistan's military capabilities then become a huge push for it. What is in it for Pakistan? You heard the first thing is the most important one: deeper funding lines. There is near total bankruptcy for Pakistan. They've been able to successfully project themselves as offering something significant for Saudi Arabia, and in return get the funding lines which are right now choked. Next, leverage as far as the entire Muslim world is concerned, the GCC countries are concerned. As I said, they're the only ones with nukes, hugely unstable country. Nobody knows who has the push button as far as the nuclear arsenal is concerned, but they'll probably leverage this more. Now let's get you the implications of what this means for the global impact. Now, this has been triggered to a large extent because of the attack by Israel on Doha, and that has triggered this kind of a response from Saudi Arabia, acting as the big leader of the entire Muslim world. Pakistan's nuclear arsenal can target Israel. So Israel, Tel Aviv will have to do a lot of focus in terms of how they look at their deterrence from here on, more closer ties between America and Israel in the wake of Pakistan's nuclear capabilities targeting Israel. Next up, possible Pakistan-Saudi-China nexus. Now, why am I saying that? 75% of Pakistani weaponry right now is of Chinese origin. So if this is the supply lines that they have from their military hardware, of course, going forward, you're looking at a Pakistan-Saudi Arabia-China nexus that may get closer in time, allowing China to continue to make deeper inroads in the region through its CPEC and then BRI investments as well. Why India remains vigilant? Well, this is an investment, this is a relationship that India has hugely invested in the last couple of years. It's a comprehensive strategic relationship for us. We've elevated it. There are regular military exercises, there are intel sharing that takes place. And also at the same time, this year, we formed the Ministerial Committee on Defense Cooperation. There's a lot of close contact between India and Saudi Arabia on all these parameters. Now, in the wake of this pact that has come to light between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, India will have to do some rethinking because of the closeness that we now share with Riyadh on multiple such factors. Well, viewers, if one were to look at its larger dimension, one can say that by binding a completely dependent Pakistan closer, Saudi Arabia has actually signaled to America and to the world that it will chart its own defense path. But more importantly, Saudi Arabia has never defended Pakistan's act in sponsoring terror against India. And that's the most important distinction that we need to keep in mind. Yes, it's signaling to America that they are going to do what they think is best in their interests. But let's not try and think that this is going to hurt Indian interests. Prime Minister Modi was in Saudi Arabia when the Pakistan-sponsored Pahalgam terror attack took place, and it was condemned in the harshest words by Riyadh. Now, Saudis are now going to jeopardize a much bigger, more evolved partnership with India by backing Pakistan's repeated misadventurism. There are deep oil interests at play as well. India is one of the largest oil importers in the world. We've pivoted towards Russia because it's cheaper. Can Saudi Arabia afford to actually antagonize us and let go of that massive oil exports to India? Well, the more I see it, the more it looks like Pakistan army committing its resources for Saudi efforts for Yemen and Israel. It's not the other way around. Well, viewers, on that note, we're slipping into a very short break on India Sense. We come back on the other side, tell you more about the latest in Trump land, yet another flip-flop, yet another U-turn. What does it mean? We tell you more. Well, viewers, in the last 48 hours, so much has happened in the India-US partnership that it's hard to keep pace. On one end, Donald Trump is extending praises on India and Prime Minister Modi, and on the other end, there are efforts to squeeze New Delhi to bring it on the negotiating table. This time, there is an India-specific punitive measure that's been leveled by Donald Trump. And in fact, let me first take you through the flip-flops and then get you to the sweet talking that Donald Trump is trying to do in the hope that nobody is going to see through it. Let's get you some of the flip-flops that is actually done. Now, first and foremost, he's actually called Prime Minister Modi his friend. This is as part of the birthday greetings that Donald Trump had extended. He'd even termed him doing a fantastic job. Next up, India-US teams, trade teams held trade talks. The representatives met. This was not a trade talk per se, but leading up to it, a precursor to trade talks. Even that had actually been completely frozen. So this was a positive movement forward. Now look at the other flip-flop that has happened. Then it dubs and clubs India in the list of the drug transit countries. There are a bunch of countries that have been identified because the US wants to crack down on fentanyl, and India has actually been clubbed in that, along with Pakistan, China, Afghanistan and several others. The second flip-flop that Donald Trump has done is it has revoked the sanctions waiver for Chabahar port. This is an India-only measure, viewers, and that's why it's so important. Chabahar port is India's response to China's Gwadar. It ensures that India has a strategic play in that region, something that America has actually backed in the past, which is why there was a sanctions waiver. That has now been revoked, an India-specific measure. Let's now play out what exactly Donald Trump said with regard to the India-US relationship, the sweet talk that he's doing, and then I come back and tell you the scenarios that he's actually facing, because all of this is going to hurt the American economy. First up, listen in to him. We come back and talk more.
And as you know, I'm very close to India. I'm very close to the Prime Minister of India. I spoke to him the other day, wished him a happy birthday. We have a very good relationship. He put out a beautiful statement, too. We have, but I said, you know, I sanctioned them. China is paying a very large tariff right now to the United States. But I'm willing to do other things, but not when the people that I'm fighting for are buying oil from Russia. If the oil price comes down, very simply, Russia will settle.
Okay, so that is what Donald Trump was saying. And now let's play out some of the scenarios that lie ahead for the India-US relationship and for Donald Trump himself. First and foremost, the first scenario, which is there, that India-US reach a limited trade deal. They focus only a few aspects of their bilateral trade and leave out some of the contentious issues, which is agriculture, corn, soya bean. Those are the most contentious issues. Leave them out, take a limited trade deal and move the relationship forward. The second scenario, Donald Trump pushes ahead for a full trade pact. He says that he's committed to his MAGA base and he's not going to move ahead till the time he puts agriculture at the center of those talks. And the moment that happens, the deal is unlikely to go any forward, simply because there are some deal breakers on both sides. India cannot allow complete access to American corn and American soybean because it's completely on GM, and that means both sides harden their stance. And what does US do in return? Trump do in return? It continues to sanction India with regard to Russia war, thinking that that's the leverage it has. Again, something that's likely to backfire, because how long will you keep telling your MAGA base that you're not being able to get a trade deal? Third scenario that, in my opinion, is probably the most likely to happen: weak American economic data that forces Donald Trump to suspend tariffs. Fed chief has already said that there are going to be 2 more rate cuts. The job growth has actually been lower. Inflation is rising in the US. All of this is going to come back and bite the American public, and they're going to ask Donald Trump that you promised us the moon with those tariffs. Look what is happening. The sooner that happens, in all probability, that's when Donald Trump is going to see that these tariffs are not working. Top voice on the show this week, Stephen Vaughn joins me. He's an American lawyer, former general counsel to the U.S. Trade Representative, acted as an acting trade representative as well. Mr. Vaughn, thanks so much for speaking to me. Let me start by asking you the fact that the trade reps met today, setting the stage for a possible round of trade talks. How big are you in terms of the optimism that many are having that maybe those trade talks will continue soon?
I think it's always good to have the trade reps talk to each other, and I think that I think it's all the news from both countries appears to be positive right now. President Trump and Mr. Modi have been exchanging compliments, so it seems to be moving in a good direction, and I'm sure that means that the trade reps are seeing some progress.
Okay, yes, the two leaders have exchanged greetings, but there's been a fair bit of flip-flop. Before I come to any of that, as far as the trade aspect is concerned, how big a deal breaker do you think corn and soya bean is? Because that's exactly what the Americans are saying, that why isn't India buying a bushel of corn from America? But India has its reservations with regards to GM crops.
So I think that, obviously, if you want to have a good trade deal with the United States, I think it's important that you show a willingness to buy U.S. agricultural goods. And to the extent that country is not willing to buy U.S. agricultural goods, that's gonna make it harder. I mean, the Americans have very little patience with this line of argument. They've been very angry and frustrated about it for a very long time, and so I think it is gonna lead to a challenge. We make some of the best agricultural products in the world, and we don't like seeing trade barriers against them.
So what you're saying is it's actually going to be a deal breaker, in fact. Okay, then let me ask from you that what's the view like in DC? Why is it that India's repeated comments about pointing out that it's not the only one that's buying Russian energy hasn't really hit home? Why is it that there are only India-specific 50% tariffs for buying Russian energy?
I don't think that's the right way to think about it. I mean, I think the right way to think about it is that the president looks at each relationship and is making a decision on a country by country basis. So with respect to China, we put more sanctions and tariffs on China than we have on anybody else, and more sanctions on China than anybody else has put on them. So I think we've been very tough on China. I think in terms of the Europeans, the president obviously had a lot of tariffs for the EU as well, and they eventually came to the table and made a deal. And India had the same. He told everybody about the August 1st deadline, and some countries met the deadline, and some countries didn't meet the deadline. So I think each country is sort of being judged on its own basis, and I think I don't think I don't think it's a good idea to say, well, because you did this for this country, you should do the same thing for us, or because we're in the same position. It's not a question of kind of this comparison or that comparison. It's a question of how the president sees the overall relationship. And I think he's expressed grave concerns about the situation with Russia. And you're hearing him tell the Europeans right now that he's willing to do more vis-a-vis Russia and China if the Europeans are willing to do the same. So I think that I think India should really I don't think it's going to be a good idea for India to constantly be bringing up other countries. I think India needs to understand that the U.S. has certain questions and issues for India, and they should be negotiating on that basis.
Okay, if those negotiations were to only be on India-specific issues, how soon before you think possibly a limited trade deal may come by to at least get some of the those issues on which there is mutual agreement out of the way?
I mean, first of all, in terms of when talks can start and when they would end, I mean, that's all ultimately just going to be driven by the two governments. I mean, the trade ministers are prepared, I'm sure, to start talks at any time. And so I think it's just a question of, I think at this point you have very, very sophisticated people on both sides. They know what the issues are for the most part. And these are really political questions in terms of when the two governments are ready to make a deal. Is the deal likely to be a limited deal? I mean, if you look at the model, for example, that USTR negotiated with the EU, that's exactly what they did. They said, we're going to resolve certain issues, and then other issues like the digital services tax or some of the other issues that we're concerned about, we're going to negotiate those later. So I could very much see the deal with India looking like that.
All right, Mr. Waldman, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks much for joining me. Let's hope that at least a limited trade deal actually gets done at the very earliest. Make in India initiative is in overdrive, from luxury jet engines to drones to laptops and beyond. Global giants are now betting on India and a push that's likely to create more jobs, greater investment and foster growth as well, and paving the way for India to be the next world's biggest manufacturing hub. From Rolls-Royce to Samsung to iPhone, every big company, every big name is all set to be here and set up shop and manufacture more. This report tells you why India is the next big manufacturing destination.
A silent revolution on the factory floors of India. Rolls-Royce is now making critical jet engine components in Bengaluru. The iPhone 17, Apple's newest flagship, rolling off Indian assembly lines. And South Korean giant Samsung preparing to churn out laptops from its Noida plant. The payoff? New jobs, cutting-edge technology and a stronger Indian economy. Make in India is reshaping India's future. Foreign direct investment in manufacturing has surged past $25 billion in 2023 alone. India's electronics exports crossed $29 billion last year, doubling in just 2 years. Already, 2.5 million jobs have been generated in the electronics manufacturing sector. Apple suppliers alone employ nearly 1.5 lakh people. And with ambitions to take manufacturing to 25% of GDP by 2025, India is chasing a $1 trillion dream. Global names are putting their money on India as their next growth engine. Apple aims to shift a quarter of its global iPhone production to India by 2026. Samsung already runs the world's largest mobile factory in India. And Rolls-Royce has signaled India will play a bigger role in its aviation supply chain. From the phones in your pocket to engines that power the skies, India is not just assembling products, it's assembling its future.
Well, with that, it's a wrap on the show. Thanks so much for watching. Next week, we come back with yet again more stories that tell you about India's rise and its growth.